At this very instant, something is unfolding inside your mind that will define the entire arc of your future. Not your formal education, not your background, not the circumstances surrounding you right now, not your genetics, your family history, or even the failures you carry from your past. What is unfolding inside you at this precise moment is far more decisive than any of those external elements. And yet, the overwhelming majority of people remain completely unaware of it. Inside your mind, there is a continuous stream of thoughts moving through your awareness, tens of thousands of thoughts, every single day. Most individuals treat these thoughts as background interference, random mental noise that carries no real weight. But what if those thoughts are not random at all? What if they are actively sculpting your reality, restructuring your brain, and determining the person you are in the process of becoming? Here is the truth you must absorb. You do not simply have thoughts. Your thoughts have you. They are systematically programming your subconscious mind, shaping your convictions about yourself and the world, and constructing the very reality you inhabit. This is not a motivational concept. This is not the philosophy of positive thinking. This is neuroscience. This is the biological reality of how your brain operates and how your identity is continuously formed. Every thought you generate is reinforcing neural pathways inside your brain. Every conviction you hold is filtering what you perceive in the environment around you. Every mental pattern you practice is becoming increasingly automatic until it solidifies into part of who you are. You are quite literally transforming into the sum of what you think, whether or not you have ever acknowledged this truth. The majority of people are unconsciously conditioning themselves for restriction, for hardship, for mediocrity. They are cycling through the identical thoughts they have always entertained, reinforcing the identical beliefs they have always held, and wondering with genuine confusion why their circumstances never shift. But you are on the verge of discovering the most consequential truth in all of human experience. When you alter your thoughts, you alter your brain. When you alter your brain, you alter your life. When you alter your life, you emerge as an entirely different individual. This is not wishful thinking. This is not blind optimism dressed up in comfortable language. This is about grasping the fundamental mechanics of how your mind constructs your reality, and then deliberately seizing command of that construction process. You are about to learn what it means to become the intentional architect of your own transformation. Welcome to Elite Success Audiobooks, Chapter 1, The Hidden Architecture of Your Reality. Have you ever paused to wonder why certain individuals seem to draw success toward them almost effortlessly, while others strain and struggle despite investing twice the effort? Why some people radiate a settled confidence, while others are perpetually haunted by self-doubt? Why particular individuals seem to move through existence with clarity and direction, while others feel disoriented and overwhelmed by the very weight of daily life? The response to that question is not what most people assume. It is not about fortune, raw talent, or the hand that circumstances dealt you. It is about something far more foundational. It is about the concealed architecture of thought that operates beneath the threshold of conscious awareness. Right now, as these words reach your ears, there is an invisible force shaping every dimension of your experience. This force determines what you notice, what you believe is achievable, how you interpret the events that unfold around you, and ultimately, who you become across the span of your lifetime. This force is your thinking patterns and not merely your conscious thoughts, the ones you are aware of choosing. I am speaking of the deeper layers, the automatic mental programs running quietly in the background of your mind, perpetually shaping your reality without your recognition. Consider this for a moment. Every single day you are exposed to millions of pieces of information, sounds, sights, conversations, opportunities, challenges, but your conscious mind can only process a minuscule fraction of this incoming data. The remainder is filtered out by your subconscious mind, which functions like an intricate screening mechanism, determining what merits your attention and what gets silently discarded. But here is the crucial element you must understand. This filtering system is not neutral. It is not randomly selecting what to surface and what to conceal. Instead, it is operating entirely on the basis of your existing thought patterns and beliefs. If your habitual thoughts and convictions orbit around problems, your mind will sift reality to reveal more problems. If your habitual thoughts and convictions orbit around opportunities, your mind will illuminate possibilities that others walk right past without ever noticing. This is precisely why two individuals can move down the same street on the same afternoon and arrive at completely different experiences. The person whose mind has been conditioned with thoughts of scarcity and restriction will register the closed storefronts, the traffic congestion, the general weight of stress. The person whose mind has been conditioned with thoughts of abundance and possibility will notice the new enterprises opening their doors, the intriguing people crossing their path, the latent opportunities embedded in ordinary moments. Same street, same afternoon, entirely different realities. Your thoughts are not simply mental events occurring privately inside your skull. They are the invisible architects of your reality. Every thought you entertain is like casting a ballot for the kind of person you are becoming. Every mental pattern you reinforce is like laying another stone in the foundation of your identity. Over time, these thoughts accumulate and crystallize into beliefs, and those beliefs become the lens through which you perceive yourself and interpret everything around you. But here is what the vast majority of people never grasp. This process is occurring whether or not you are conscious of it, whether you are deliberately selecting your thoughts or allowing them to operate on autopilot. They are still engineering your reality. The question is not whether your thoughts are creating your life. The question is whether you are going to assume conscious command of this process or allow it to unfold entirely by default. Most people are navigating their entire existence on mental autopilot. They wake up each morning and immediately begin cycling through the same thoughts they entertained the day before. They replay the same anxieties, the same hesitations, the same habitual mental loops. They reinforce the same convictions about their limitations and their worth. And then they genuinely wonder why their life refuses to change. But what if you could interrupt this cycle? What if you could develop awareness of the thoughts that are constructing your reality and deliberately choose different ones? What if you could reprogram your mind to filter for achievement instead of struggle, for possibilities instead of problems, for expansion instead of contraction? This is not merely possible, it becomes inevitable the moment you truly understand how your mind operates. Your brain is not rigid. It is not permanently fixed. It is continuously shifting, continuously rewiring itself in response to the thoughts you think and the experiences you generate. This is neuroplasticity, and it is the very reason genuine transformation is always within reach. Regardless of how immobilized you may feel in this moment, the thoughts you choose today are literally reconfiguring your brain for tomorrow. The mental patterns you practice are growing stronger and more automatic with each repetition. The identity you hold in your mind is solidifying into your lived experience. This is the hidden architecture of your life. And once you genuinely understand it, everything is seen differently. Chapter 2. The Programming You Never Chose. Right now, as these words move through your awareness, there are programs operating inside your mind that you never consciously installed. These programs are governing how you perceive yourself, what you regard as possible for your existence, and how you respond to the challenges and openings that appear before you. They are shaping your emotional life, your choices, and your behavior in ways that remain entirely beneath your awareness. These programs were not authored by you. They were installed in your mind by your environment, your experiences, and the individuals who surrounded you long before you possessed the cognitive sophistication to evaluate whether they were accurate or genuinely useful. And the vast majority of people navigate their entire lives being directed by these inherited programs, never recognizing that they carry the power to rewrite them entirely. Think about a computer for a moment. When you acquire a computer, it arrives with software already loaded onto it. Some of this software functions well and serves you admirably, but some of it may be outdated, corrupted, or entirely superfluous. The distinction is that with a computer, you can readily examine which programs are active and choose to remove the ones that no longer serve you. But with your mind, these programs are invisible, running silently in the background, influencing your every action without your knowledge. From the instant you arrived in this world, your mind began absorbing information about the nature of reality. As a child, your brain existed in a state of extraordinary receptivity, absorbing everything in your environment like a sponge drawing in water. You took in not merely the words spoken to you, but the emotions behind them, the beliefs embedded in them, the attitudes and limitations they carried. You absorbed the energy of your surroundings, the spoken and unspoken rules about what was attainable and what lay beyond reach. If you were raised in an environment where people regularly expressed sentiments like money is always scarce, or life is a constant struggle, or never set your expectations too high, your developing mind registered these as foundational truths about reality. If you were told you lacked sufficient intelligence, or that you were too sensitive, or that you simply were not built for certain pursuits, those statements embedded themselves in your self-concept, whether they held any actual truth or not. But it was not solely the explicit messages that programmed your mind. It was equally what you witnessed. If you observed the adults around you perpetually straining with financial pressure, your subconscious mind absorbed the program that money is difficult and scarce. If you witnessed tension and conflict in relationships, You absorbed patterns about what intimacy looks like. If you watched the people around you shrinking from opportunities, avoiding risk, and resigning themselves to less than they genuinely wanted, you absorbed those patterns as well. By the time you reached adulthood, your subconscious mind had been saturated with thousands of these inherited programs. Some of them serve you well, but a great many of them are limitations that were never authentically yours. They are not grounded in your actual capabilities or your genuine potential. They are rooted in the experiences, the fears, and the restrictions of other people. The difficulty is that most people never interrogate these programs. They presume that the manner in which they think and feel about themselves reflects their authentic personality. They accept that their fears, their hesitations, and their restrictions are simply intrinsic aspects of who they are. They do not recognize that these are acquired patterns that can be systematically unlearned and replaced with something that genuinely serves them. Consider a telling example. Many people carry a deep unconscious fear of success. This may seem paradoxical, because consciously, every person desires to succeed. But at the subconscious level, they may have absorbed messages suggesting that success is perilous, that it cultivates arrogance, that it creates distance from others, or that they simply do not merit it. These subconscious programs will undermine their efforts every time they approach something significant. Or consider the program surrounding self-worth. Many people hold an unconscious conviction that love and approval must be earned through achievement, through perfection, through consistently placing others' needs ahead of their own. This program propels them toward exhaustion, leaving them perpetually feeling inadequate, forever reaching for external validation. They do not perceive that this relentless hunger for approval is not their natural state. It is a program installed during a period when they were young and unguarded. The most insidious dimension of these inherited programs is the way they feel authentic. They feel like your own genuine thoughts and beliefs, because you have been entertaining them for such an extended period. But the truth is that many of your most deeply held convictions about yourself and your life were never selected by you. They were absorbed from your environment before you possessed the judgment to assess them. This is precisely why positive thinking alone delivers little lasting value for most people. You cannot simply overlay optimistic thoughts on top of deep-rooted limiting programming and expect permanent change. It is like running new software on a corrupted operating system. The new software will keep crashing because the underlying system is fundamentally incompatible. Authentic transformation requires going deeper. It requires identifying these inherited programs, questioning their validity with genuine rigor, and consciously selecting new ones that actually serve your highest potential. The beautiful reality is that every single program running inside your mind can be rewritten. The same neuroplasticity that permitted these patterns to be installed in the first place can be directed toward creating entirely new patterns. You can literally rewire your brain to support the life you genuinely desire, rather than the life your conditioning has decided you deserve. Chapter 3. The Science of Mental Transformation. What you are about to receive will fundamentally reshape the way you understand your own capacity for change. For many decades, the prevailing scientific view held that the human brain was essentially fixed once adulthood was reached. The consensus was that once you entered adulthood, your neural pathways were permanently established, and meaningful change was largely beyond reach. This conviction kept countless people locked inside patterns they believed were permanent features of their existence. Then neuroscientists arrived at one of the most significant discoveries in the entire history of brain research: neuroplasticity. They established that the human brain is not fixed at all. It is perpetually shifting, perpetually restructuring itself, perpetually generating new neural pathways in direct response to your thoughts, your experiences, and your behaviors. This revelation did not merely transform neuroscience, it transformed everything humanity understands about human potential. Your brain is not comparable to a computer with hardware components that resist modification. It is more accurately compared to a living garden that is continuously growing, shifting, and adapting in response to what you cultivate and how you tend it. Every thought you entertain is like placing a seed in that garden. Every mental pattern you rehearse is like providing that seed with water and light. Over time, those thoughts mature into beliefs. Those beliefs mold your emotional life, and those emotions direct your actions. Here is the most critical element of this understanding. This process is happening without interruption. Whether you are aware of it or not, right now as these words reach your ears, your brain is literally restructuring itself. New neural connections are forming. Existing pathways are being reinforced or allowed to diminish based on where you are directing your attention and what you are choosing to entertain in your mind. This means transformation is not simply possible, it is inevitable. You cannot repeat the same thoughts without your brain growing more efficient at producing those thoughts. You cannot practice the same mental patterns without those patterns becoming increasingly automatic. The question is never whether your brain will change. The question is whether it will change in the direction you consciously choose, or whether it will shift by default. Every thought you generate creates a distinct pattern of electrical activity throughout your brain. When you repeat the same thought consistently, the neural pathways connected to that thought become more deeply established. The analogy of a path through a field captures this precisely. The first time you cross an unmowed field, you are pushing through dense growth. But if you traverse the identical route each day, a clear, navigable trail gradually emerges. Your thoughts follow exactly the same principle. The first time you entertain a new thought, it demands deliberate effort and conscious intention. But with each repetition, it grows more accessible, until eventually it arises without any effort whatsoever. This explains why changing your thinking patterns can initially feel like resistance you are not prepared for. You are literally forging new neural pathways, while the established ones remain present, remain powerful, and continue pulling you back toward the familiar. But here is the remarkable part. Your brain is extraordinarily capable of restructuring itself when you understand how to collaborate with it rather than work against it. The key lies in grasping the three foundational principles of neuroplasticity: repetition, emotional intensity, and focused attention. Repetition forms the bedrock of all neural rewiring. Your brain fortifies whatever you practice most consistently. If you practice thoughts centered on restriction and fear, you become increasingly proficient at restriction and fear. If you practice thoughts centered on possibility and competence, you become increasingly proficient at possibility and competence. The simplicity is matched only by the power. But repetition standing alone is insufficient. The second principle is emotional intensity. Your brain assigns particular priority to experiences that carry emotional charge. This is why experiences involving significant emotional impact can generate immediate, lasting shifts in thinking patterns, while emotionally neutral experiences leave relatively little impression. The advantage is that you can deploy this principle with full intentionality. When you pair new thoughts with constructive emotions, excitement, gratitude, determined resolve, your brain restructures itself at a considerably accelerated pace. The third principle is focused attention. Your brain rewires most rapidly when you are fully present and concentrated on the matter at hand. This explains why the mechanical repetition of affirmations without genuine engagement often produces little, while deeply immersed visualization and meditation can create profound internal shifts in a comparatively brief span of time. When you combine all three principles together, repetition, emotional intensity, and focused attention, you establish the precise conditions for accelerated neural rewiring. Scientists have recorded extraordinary demonstrations of neuroplasticity. Individuals who have experienced strokes and lost the ability to speak or move have rewired their brains to reclaim those functions by developing entirely new neural pathways. Taxi drivers in London who must commit thousands of streets to memory actually show measurable expansion in the hippocampal regions of their brains. Musicians who engage in intensive practice demonstrate dramatic structural changes in the brain areas responsible for refined motor function. You do not need to be recovering from a neurological event or mastering a musical instrument to harness neuroplasticity. You can direct these same principles toward rewiring your brain for confidence in place of self-doubt, for abundance in place of scarcity, for limitless possibility in place of constriction. You have the capacity to become the deliberate architect of your own consciousness. Chapter 4. The Identity Creation Process. There is a profound truth that most people never encounter. You do not simply possess an identity. You are perpetually constructing your identity through the thoughts you elect to entertain. Every moment of every day, you are either cementing who you have been or assembling who you are in the process of becoming. Most people operate under the assumption that identity is fixed, something discovered about oneself, rather than something actively authored. But the truth is far more empowering than that. Your identity is something you actively construct. Right now, you carry a narrative about who you are. This narrative encompasses your beliefs about your capabilities, your worth, your potential, and your constraints. You may perceive yourself as confident or uncertain, thriving or struggling, creative or analytical, naturally social or more internal. These labels feel accurate because you have been generating thoughts that support them for such an extended period that they have become reflexive. But here is the shift that changes everything. These identity labels are not facts about you. They are simply mental habits that you have reinforced through consistent repetition. And because they are habits, they are entirely subject to change. You can literally think yourself into a new identity by consistently choosing thoughts aligned with who you want to become, rather than who you have been. The process of identity creation operates through what psychologists describe as identity-based thinking. This is when you begin making decisions and generating thoughts based on the identity you intend to embody, rather than the identity you currently inhabit. Instead of thinking, "I wish I were more confident," you begin thinking, "I am confident." So what would a genuinely confident person do in this moment? This shift is subtle in its mechanics, but extraordinary in its impact. When you think from your chosen identity rather than toward it, you begin training your brain to function from that new vantage point. You start perceiving different things, generating different emotions, and taking different actions. Over sufficient time, this new orientation becomes natural, and the identity you have been practicing becomes who you authentically are. Consider a concrete illustration. Picture someone who holds the self-concept that they are simply not a morning person. Each morning, they silence the alarm repeatedly, drag themselves upright, and launch their day already feeling behind and burdened. They reinforce this identity through what they say to themselves and to others. "I am just not built for mornings." But what if this individual chose to construct a new identity as someone who rises with energy and genuine enthusiasm for the day ahead? They would begin by generating different internal thoughts. "I am someone who wakes refreshed and energized by what the day holds." They would imagine themselves rising promptly with a sense of forward momentum. They would make choices throughout their day that support this new identity, such as establishing an earlier bedtime and preparing the following morning the night before. At the outset, this new identity would feel artificial and uncomfortable. The established neural pathways would still exert their pull, and the old identity would feel more real. But through consistent practice, the new identity would grow gradually more dominant. The person would begin genuinely experiencing more morning vitality. They would start actually looking forward to beginning their days. Eventually, being a morning person would feel as natural and authentic as not being one once did. This identical process operates across every dimension of identity. You can think yourself into greater confidence, deeper creativity, more consistent discipline, expanded success, or a more generous and loving nature. The understanding you must carry is this: identity is not something you uncover about yourself. It is something you decide about yourself and then practice with consistency until it becomes automatic. The most accomplished individuals in every field, whether they consciously recognize the mechanism or not, are masters of identity construction. They do not simply establish goals and labor toward them. They first determine who they must become in order to achieve those goals, and then they begin thinking and operating from that identity without delay. They do not wait for external success to arrive before allowing themselves to think like a successful person. They adopt the thinking patterns of success first, and the corresponding results follow as a natural consequence. This is why traditional goal setting so frequently fails. Most people concentrate on what they want to achieve without genuinely examining who they need to become in order to achieve it. They maintain the same thought patterns, sustain the same identity, and yet expect their circumstances to produce different outcomes. But your external results will always mirror your internal identity. If you want your results to change, the identity must change first. The empowering dimension of identity creation is that it requires no external permission. You do not need to wait until readiness arrives or until your circumstances improve. You can begin thinking from your new identity in this present moment. You can begin asking yourself, what would the person I am becoming think about this situation? How would they feel encountering this? What would they choose to do? When you pair identity-based thinking with deliberate visualization and affirmation, the process accelerates significantly. Rather than merely declaring, I am confident, you can vividly picture yourself moving through the world with settled assurance, feeling the emotional texture of confidence, and observing how others respond to that energy. You are not simply affirming an identity. You are inhabiting it within your imagination, and your brain does not distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. The key to sustained identity creation is patience paired with consistency. You are rewiring decades of neuroconditioning, and that requires time. There will be stretches when your previous identity asserts itself more powerfully than the new one. This is entirely normal. The established neural pathways remain present and will attempt to pull you back toward the familiar. But every time you choose to think from your new identity rather than the old one, you are reinforcing the emerging pathways and allowing the old ones to gradually diminish. The most liberating recognition available to you is this. You are not confined to the identity you have carried until now. You are not restricted by your past experiences, your current circumstances, or the opinions others hold about your potential. You possess the capacity to consciously create any identity you choose, and your brain will restructure itself to make that identity your lived experience. You become what you think, not because of mystical forces, but because of the demonstrably real and scientifically established process of neuroplasticity and deliberate identity construction. Chapter 5: Breaking Free from Mental Prisons. There is an invisible prison that holds more people captive than any physical confinement ever could. It possesses no bars, no walls, no guards stationed at its perimeter, and yet it is more restrictive than the most fortified institution ever constructed. This prison is assembled entirely from thoughts, and the majority of its inhabitants do not even recognize that they are confined. They have mistaken the walls of their mental prison for the actual boundaries of reality itself. Every limiting belief you hold, every fear that prevents you from taking action, every internal voice that declares you are not capable of that, or that life is not designed for people like you, is another bar in this invisible structure. These mental barriers feel completely real because you have been inhabiting them for so long that you cannot envision existence without them. But the jarring truth is that most of these constraints exist exclusively in your mind. Consider this for a moment. Right now, there are almost certainly things you believe you are incapable of doing, goals you have classified as impossible for someone in your position, dreams you have quietly relinquished because they appeared beyond the realm of realistic expectation. But what if many of these constraints are not grounded in actual impossibility? What if they are built upon inherited programming, upon experiences from the past that no longer have relevance, or upon thoughts you have rehearsed so frequently that they have acquired the texture of truth? The most heartbreaking element of mental confinement is that the captives so often become their own guardians. They patrol their own thoughts, suppress their own aspirations, and disqualify themselves from opportunities before anyone else has the opportunity to express a single objection. They have internalized the voices of restriction so thoroughly that they perform the function of limitation without any external enforcement. Here is how this structure gets built. From the earliest periods of childhood, you received thousands of messages about what was attainable and what was not. Some of these communications were explicit. Do not elevate your hopes. Resources are limited and hard to come by. People from our background do not pursue ambitions like those. Others were conveyed indirectly through the examples that surrounded you. If you rarely witnessed people pursuing and realizing substantial aspirations, your mind arrived at the conclusion that substantial aspirations must be unrealistic. Over extended time, these messages accumulate and crystallize into what psychologists identify as limiting beliefs. These beliefs function like invisible barricades, preventing you from even entertaining certain possibilities as options. They do not merely halt action, they prevent the thoughts that could lead to action from ever forming. They create an internal enclosure that feels, from the inside, like the totality of the available universe. But here is the liberating insight. These limiting beliefs are not established facts about reality. They are simply thoughts you have repeated so frequently that they have developed the sensation of being true. And because they are thoughts, they are entirely open to change. The prison exists only within your mind, which means that you already carry the means of your own liberation. The initial step toward breaking free is recognition. You must develop awareness of the limiting beliefs that are directing your life. This demands that you begin paying genuine attention to your internal dialogue, particularly the thoughts that arise when you consider pursuing something that genuinely matters to you. Notice the voice that announces, "That is not realistic. You are not the right person for that. What makes you think that could work for someone like you?" These thoughts may present themselves as practical wisdom or grounded assessment, but they are simply old programming attempting to keep you within familiar territory. Your mind is structured to prioritize perceived safety over growth, familiarity over possibility. It would rather keep you in a confined, known world than risk the discomfort of expansion. But this protective mechanism, which genuinely served you during your early years, becomes a limitation that works against you as an adult. Once you have identified these limiting beliefs, the subsequent step is challenging their validity. Ask yourself with honest curiosity, is this actually true, or is this something I was told or gradually came to accept as true? Where did this belief originate? Is it grounded in verifiable facts or in fear? Is this belief contributing to my growth, or is it functioning to keep me confined? Most limiting beliefs collapse under sustained examination because they are not anchored in current reality. They are rooted in outdated information, in other people's restrictions, or in isolated experiences that have been extrapolated into universal conclusions. When you genuinely examine them, you often discover that they are far less substantial than they appeared. The third step is replacement. You cannot simply extract a limiting belief and leave an empty space in its place. You must replace it with a new, empowering conviction that serves your expansion. If you have been operating from the thought that you are not sufficiently capable to create your own enterprise, you might replace it with, I am fully capable of acquiring every skill I need in order to succeed. If you have been operating from the thought that your relationships consistently end in failure, you might replace it with, I am continuously developing and strengthening my capacity to build genuine, loving connections. The key to successful belief replacement is making the new belief emotionally real. You cannot arrive at a new belief through intellectual decision alone. You must feel it, visualize it, and experience it within your imagination until your subconscious mind begins to accept it as truth. This is where the practice of mental rehearsal becomes indispensable. Mental rehearsal is the practice of vividly imagining yourself succeeding, achieving the outcomes you desire, and embodying the convictions you are choosing to install. When you engage in this consistently, your brain begins to wire itself for achievement rather than restriction. You are quite literally practicing freedom from your mental prison, and your mind begins to accept freedom as the new ordinary. But liberation from mental prisons demands more than simply changing beliefs. It requires transforming your entire relationship with your thoughts. Rather than accepting every thought as an established fact, you develop the capacity to observe your thoughts with objectivity. You come to understand that you are not your thoughts. You are the consciousness that observes thoughts. This perceptual shift is extraordinarily liberating because it means you are no longer at the mercy of your mental conditioning. When you genuinely grasp that thoughts are simply mental events rather than absolute truths, you acquire the power to determine which thoughts to receive and which to set aside. You become the gatekeeper of your own awareness. You understand that you are not obligated to believe every thought your mind produces, and you are not compelled to act on every emotional impulse that surfaces. This is the threshold where genuine freedom begins. When you recognize that you are not imprisoned by your circumstances, your history, or your conditioning, but rather by your thoughts about these things. And thoughts are always changeable. Always. Every time you choose a new thought over an established one, every time you interrogate a limiting belief rather than passively accepting it, every time you take action despite fear rather than in service of it, you are literally restructuring your brain for freedom. Chapter 6. The Power of Thought Selection. Every single moment of your existence, you are faced with a decision that will determine your trajectory. Which thoughts will you receive and which will you decline? Most people never recognize that this choice exists. They relate to their thoughts the way they relate to weather, as something that simply occurs, something beyond their capacity to influence. But the truth is that you possess considerably more authority over your thoughts than you have ever exercised. And learning to activate this authority is the central key to transforming your entire existence. Your mind generates tens of thousands of thoughts every day. Some of these thoughts serve you, propelling you toward your goals and reinforcing the identity you are deliberately constructing. Others work against you, solidifying old patterns and keeping you tethered to outdated realities. The distinction between people who genuinely transform their lives and those who remain anchored in the same place is not the nature of the thoughts their minds naturally produce. It is their capacity to consciously choose which thoughts to nourish and which to starve of attention. Think of your mind as a garden. In any garden, you will naturally find both cultivated growth and unwanted growth arising simultaneously. The cultivated growth represents empowering thoughts that contribute to your flourishing. The unwanted growth represents limiting thoughts that compete with and diminish your potential. A skilled gardener does not invest energy in being distressed by the existence of weeds. They simply extract them and redirect their care toward nurturing what they have chosen to grow. Your mind operates on exactly the same principle. The initial step in thought selection is cultivating awareness. The majority of people are entirely unconscious of their thinking patterns. Thoughts arise automatically and are accepted without examination. But when you develop the capacity to observe your thoughts with some degree of objectivity, you gain the authority to determine which ones merit your attention and which ones should be respectfully dismissed. This process is initiated through what psychologists identify as metacognition, the practice of thinking about your own thinking. Rather than being absorbed in the content of your thoughts, you shift position and observe the thinking process from a slight remove. You notice when your mind generates a limiting thought, and rather than automatically accepting it as true, you pause and ask, is this thought genuinely useful? Does it move me toward what I am building, or away from it? Is it rooted in truth or in conditioned fear? When you observe yourself generating a thought that does not serve you, there is no need to combat it or force it into suppression. Resistance applied to thoughts only amplifies their presence. Instead, you simply acknowledge the thought and then consciously redirect your awareness toward a thought that better supports your intended direction. It is comparable to changing the channel on a radio. You are not attempting to destroy the frequency you no longer wish to hear. You are simply tuning into a different one. As an illustration, if you notice the thought arising, I am not sufficiently qualified for this opportunity, you might acknowledge it and then consciously elect to entertain, I am in a continuous process of growth, and I am positioned exactly where I need to be to take my next meaningful step. You are not denying reality or retreating into wishful thinking. You are choosing to concentrate on thoughts that expand your capacity rather than thoughts that diminish it. The essential foundation for effective thought selection is having a clear, compelling vision of who you are in the process of becoming. When you carry clarity about the identity you are constructing, it becomes considerably more straightforward to assess whether a given thought supports that identity or undermines it. Every thought becomes either a contribution toward your desired future self or a reinforcement of patterns you have already decided to leave behind. The selection is always yours to make. This practice demands patience and consistent effort. You have been thinking automatically for such an extended time that conscious thought selection will initially feel unfamiliar and effortful. Your mind will resist this heightened level of awareness because it threatens the automatic patterns that have been operating without interruption. But every time you choose an empowering thought over a limiting one, you are strengthening your capacity to direct your own awareness. Over time, thought selection grows progressively more natural and eventually more automatic. You develop an internal orientation that naturally gravitates toward thoughts aligned with your highest potential. Your mind begins to spontaneously generate more empowering thoughts because you have trained it to do so through the consistent practice of conscious selection. You are literally restructuring your brain to generate thoughts that support the life you are intentionally creating. The most significant realization is that you are not your thoughts. You are the consciousness that observes thoughts and determines which ones to accept. This understanding delivers tremendous freedom because it means you are never genuinely trapped by any particular thought or mental pattern. Regardless of how persistent or compelling a limiting thought may be, you always retain the authority to observe it from a neutral position and consciously choose something that serves you better. Thought selection is not about forced positivity or the refusal to acknowledge reality. It is about assuming conscious command of the most potent creative instrument available to you, which is your thinking mind. When you consistently choose thoughts aligned with your intended identity and aspirations, you discover with growing certainty that you truly do become what you think. Chapter 7. Rewiring your mental operating system. Your mind functions like a sophisticated computational system, possessing a mental operating system that governs how you process incoming information, arrive at decisions, and respond to the world that surrounds you. Much like a computer's operating system, your mental operating system was established during the early years of your life and has been running with relatively little fundamental modification ever since. But unlike a physical computer, you retain the capacity to upgrade your mental operating system at any point you choose. Your current mental operating system was shaped by your early experiences, your surrounding environment, and the individuals who exerted the greatest influence on you during your formative years. This underlying programming determines your default responses when you encounter challenges, your automatic emotional reactions when circumstances shift, and your unconscious convictions about what your life can realistically hold. For most people, this operating system contains outdated programming that no longer serves their current goals and aspirations. The difficulty with operating on outdated mental programming is that it restricts your capacity to absorb new information and adapt to new circumstances. You may possess the intelligence and the capability to accomplish significant things, but if your mental operating system has been programmed around limitation, it will work to undermine your efforts every time you attempt to exceed the boundaries of its established parameters. Rewiring your mental operating system begins with recognizing that the majority of your thoughts, emotional responses, and behaviors are not deliberate choices. They are automatic programs running in the background of your mind. These programs were established through repetition and emotional intensity, and they can be replaced using those very same mechanisms. The first step in upgrading your mental operating system is identifying the core programs that are presently active. These programs tend to reveal themselves through your automatic thoughts when you encounter opportunities, through your recurring emotional patterns, and through your most consistent behavioral tendencies. If you habitually generate thoughts of self-doubt when presented with new opportunities, that is a program. If anxiety arises automatically in social environments, that is a program. If you consistently defer important tasks rather than engaging with them directly, that is a program. Once you have identified these automatic programs, you can initiate the process of conscious reprogramming. This involves deliberately installing new mental programming that more effectively serves your current goals and your chosen identity. The determining factors are consistency and emotional engagement. You must practice your new mental programs with the same intensity and repetition that originally established the old ones. Mental rehearsal is among the most powerful instruments available for reprogramming your operating system. When you vividly picture yourself thinking, feeling, and conducting yourself in new ways, you are quite literally installing new neural programming. Your brain does not differentiate between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. So mental practice produces the same neural restructuring as physical practice. For example, if your intention is to install a program oriented toward confidence, you would invest time each day in mentally rehearsing confident thoughts, confident physical bearing, confident communication, and confident behavior. You would picture yourself navigating various situations with complete self-assurance, experiencing the emotional quality of confidence, and receiving genuine and positive responses from the people around you. With sufficient repetition, this mental rehearsal becomes your new default programming. Affirmations contribute to this reprogramming process, but only when applied with genuine engagement. Simply reciting positive statements in a mechanical, emotionally disconnected manner is comparable to initiating a software installation without completing the required process. It does not successfully take hold. Effective affirmations carry emotional charge, possess genuine personal meaning, and are repeated with consistency until they feel authentic and natural. The most impactful affirmations are grounded in identity rather than in goals. Rather than affirming, "I will eventually be successful," you affirm, "I am a successful individual." Rather than "I am working toward confidence," you affirm, "I am confident." This nuanced shift programs your mind to operate from the platform of your chosen identity, rather than perpetually reaching toward it from a distance. Environmental programming represents another essential dimension of mental rewiring. Your mind is in continuous dialogue with the information you consume, the individuals you spend time alongside, and the environments you regularly inhabit. If you are committed to installing new mental programming, you must consciously shape your environment to reinforce that programming. This means surrounding yourself with evidence of the mindset you are cultivating. Engage with material created by people who embody the identity you are constructing. Invest time with individuals who think and conduct themselves in ways that align with your chosen direction. Your mind learns through sustained observation and exposure. The process of mental reprogramming also requires interrupting old patterns through deliberate intervention. Every time you notice yourself running an established program, whether through an old thought pattern, a familiar emotional response, or an automatic behavior, you have been given an opportunity to install new programming. Rather than following the old program automatically, you pause and consciously choose a response consistent with your intended identity. The key to successful mental reprogramming is understanding that genuine change unfolds gradually and then with sudden acceleration. Initially, Your new programming will feel imposed and unnatural because the established programs retain their strength. But with persistent practice, a tipping point emerges where the new programming becomes dominant and your new way of thinking, feeling, and operating becomes effortless and authentic. Remember, you are not engaged in the task of repairing something defective. You are elevating to a more advanced version of yourself. Your mind is remarkably adaptable and fully capable of running whatever programming you choose to install. The question that deserves your genuine consideration is, what kind of mental operating system do you intend to be running 1 year from this moment? Chapter 8: The Art of Mental Conditioning. Elite performers in every demanding field understand something that most people never arrive at on their own. Outstanding performance is not solely the product of physical or technical preparation. It is the result of mental conditioning, the systematic practice of training your mind to think, feel, and respond in ways that consistently generate excellent outcomes. What most people do not recognize is that this precise principle applies with equal force to every dimension of life. You can condition your mind for achievement, for settled confidence, for sustained creativity, or for any other quality you choose to develop. Mental conditioning is categorically different from the practice of positive thinking or the temporary lift of external motivation. It is not about amplifying your energy artificially or maintaining a pretense that everything is functioning well when it is not. It is about systematically training your mind to operate at a higher and more consistent level through deliberate practice and persistent repetition. Just as physical conditioning makes your body more capable and resilient, mental conditioning makes your mind more adaptable, more focused, and more consistently effective. The foundation of mental conditioning is the recognition that your mind, like your body, responds directly to training. When you consistently practice particular mental patterns, those patterns grow stronger and more automatic. When you allow certain mental capacities to go without attention, they diminish. This means you can quite literally condition yourself to think the way the most accomplished people in any field think, to generate emotions that align with your goals, and to respond to pressure and adversity with clarity and composure. The first element of effective mental conditioning is absolute clarity of intention. You must be completely clear about which mental qualities you are committing to develop. Vague intentions reliably produce vague outcomes. Rather than stating broadly that you want to be more confident, you define with precision what confidence looks and feels like in your specific life. You speak in meetings without holding back. You approach unfamiliar people with genuine ease. You take on ambitious projects without allowing self-doubt to stall your engagement. Once your intention is established, with that degree of clarity, you create specific mental exercises designed to develop those particular qualities. If you are committed to building unshakable confidence, you might practice confidence-oriented visualizations each morning, mentally rehearsing scenarios in which you demonstrate complete self-assurance. If you are developing the capacity for sustained, laser-like focus, you might engage in attention exercises that progressively extend the duration of concentrated awareness. The essential approach to effective mental conditioning is treating it with the same commitment you would bring to physical training. You must be consistent, progressively challenging, and fully intentional. Just as you would not expect to develop physical fitness through occasional or half-hearted effort, you cannot expect to build mental strength without committed and regular practice. You must allocate dedicated time for mental training and engage with it with genuine seriousness. Visualization stands as one of the most potent instruments in mental conditioning. When approached with proper engagement, visualization is not passive daydreaming or unfocused wishing. It is systematic mental rehearsal that programs your subconscious mind for peak performance. You construct detailed mental experiences of yourself performing at your best, feeling precisely the way you want to feel, and achieving the outcomes you are working toward. The greater the sensory vividness and emotional engagement in these rehearsals, the more powerfully they condition your mind. Mental conditioning also encompasses the development of what psychologists call emotional regulation, the ability to sustain optimal internal states regardless of external conditions. This does not involve suppressing your emotions or maintaining a performance of feeling something you do not. It means training your mind to generate and sustain emotional states that support your goals even when you encounter difficulty or setbacks. For example, you can condition yourself to welcome challenges as energizing rather than threatening. You can train your mind to interpret obstacles as development opportunities rather than as evidence that you should withdraw. You can cultivate the capacity to maintain composed confidence even in high-pressure situations. These are not fixed personality traits present from birth. They are mental capacities that you can develop through deliberate practice. Another essential dimension of mental conditioning is the development of mental resilience, the ability to recover quickly from setbacks and sustain forward progress regardless of what unfolds. Mental resilience is not about emotional hardness or the suppression of feeling. It is about possessing a conditioned response to adversity that allows you to extract valuable lessons, maintain perspective, and continue moving toward your goals. This resilience is cultivated through what psychologists call cognitive reframing, the practice of consciously choosing empowering interpretations of events, rather than automatically interpreting failures as confirmation of inadequacy. You train your mind to receive them as useful feedback and genuine learning opportunities. Rather than experiencing challenges as threats, you condition yourself to encounter them as invitations to grow more capable. The most advanced application of mental conditioning involves training your mind to access peak performance states with intention. These are states of consciousness in which you feel completely focused, grounded in confidence, and fully capable. The most accomplished performers in every field have developed the capacity to enter these states consistently through specific mental anchors and conditioning practices. You can develop your own peak performance anchors through consistent practice. This might involve particular breathing patterns, specific phrases you direct toward yourself, or mental images that produce an immediate shift in your internal state. Mental conditioning also demands what high performers call pressure training, the deliberate practice of your mental skills under genuinely challenging conditions. Sustaining confidence and focus when everything is proceeding smoothly is relatively accessible. True mental conditioning means being able to access your most capable internal state, even when you are navigating pressure, criticism, or uncertainty. The compelling truth about mental conditioning is that its benefits compound with sustained practice. Each day you invest in this work, you are not simply improving for that single day. You are building mental capacity that will continue serving you for years. Your mind grows progressively more inclined toward the states and patterns you have been conditioning until excellence becomes your natural default rather than an outcome you must strain to produce. Chapter 9. Breaking the Cycle of Automatic Thinking. Right now, as these words reach your awareness, a continuous stream of thoughts is moving through your consciousness. The overwhelming majority of these thoughts are entirely automatic, arising without any deliberate intention on your part, following well-worn patterns that have been carved into your mind over years, and in many cases, over decades. These automatic thoughts function like mental habits, and just like any habit, they can either serve your highest potential or hold you in perpetual limitation. The difficulty is that most people never come to recognize that they have the capacity to break the cycle of automatic thinking and consciously elect their own mental patterns. Automatic thinking develops because your brain is fundamentally engineered for efficiency. It has no interest in expending conscious energy on every individual experience and decision. So it creates mental shortcuts, automatic patterns that allow you to navigate familiar territory without the expenditure of deliberate effort. For routine activities and well-known environments, this capacity is genuinely valuable. But when these automatic patterns carry a negative or limiting quality, they transform into mental enclosures that keep you anchored in realities you have long outgrown. The cycle of automatic thinking operates in this way. A situation surfaces and triggers an automatic thought. That thought generates an emotional response. The emotion drives a behavior, and the behavior reinforces the original thought pattern, making it even more automatic the next time a similar situation appears. Consider the person who automatically generates the thought, "I am not capable in front of an audience," when asked to give a presentation. That thought produces anxiety. The anxiety leads to avoiding speaking opportunities whenever possible. The avoidance reinforces the original conviction. The cycle becomes self-perpetuating and self-confirming. Most people remain entirely unconscious of these automatic cycles as they operate. They experience the emotional responses and behavioral consequences without recognizing that both originated from automatic thoughts that could be questioned, evaluated, and deliberately changed. They interpret their reactions as inherent aspects of their personality or as natural responses to particular situations, never perceiving that these reactions are actually responses to thoughts that move so rapidly through consciousness that they barely register as thoughts at all. Liberation from automatic thinking begins with what experienced meditation practitioners call mindful awareness, the cultivated capacity to observe your thoughts as they arise without being immediately swept away by them. This is not a practice of suppressing thoughts or rendering judgment on them as acceptable or unacceptable. It is the practice of creating a small but significant space between yourself and your thoughts, so that you can examine them from a position of relative objectivity rather than automatically believing and acting on them. The first step in developing this kind of awareness is simply learning to notice when you are thinking automatically versus when you are thinking with genuine, conscious intention. automatic thoughts tend to feel pressing, emotionally charged, and self-evidently true. They arise rapidly and seem to demand immediate acceptance and action. Consciously chosen thoughts, by contrast, tend to feel more deliberate, more settled, and genuinely open to examination. They arise from choice rather than from conditioning. Once you develop the ability to notice automatic thoughts as they arise, you can begin the process of questioning them. This is not about arguing with your own mind or attempting to convince yourself that certain thoughts are incorrect. It is about approaching your thoughts with genuine and open curiosity. Is this thought actually true in any verifiable way? Where did it originate? Is it moving me toward the life I am building, or pulling me away from it? What would I think about this exact situation if I were thinking with conscious intention rather than from automatic conditioning? This questioning process is extraordinarily powerful because it interrupts the automatic cycle at its source. Rather than having a thought lead directly and inevitably to an emotion and then to a behavior, you insert a moment of conscious evaluation between the thought and its consequences. That brief pause is sufficient to choose a different thought, which will generate a different emotional response and lead to a genuinely different behavioral outcome. The most effective approach to dismantling automatic thinking patterns is to replace them with consciously chosen thoughts. You cannot simply remove an automatic thought and leave an empty space in the mind. Your mind will fill that space with another automatic thought. Instead, you must actively install new thought patterns aligned with your chosen goals and identity. This installation process requires both repetition and genuine emotional engagement. One of the most effective techniques for interrupting automatic thinking is what psychologists refer to as thought stopping. When you notice an automatic thought pattern beginning to gain momentum, you mentally issue the instruction to stop and immediately redirect your attention to something you have consciously chosen, whether that is a selected thought, a physical sensation, or an external point of focus. This technique systematically trains your mind to interrupt automatic patterns before they develop sufficient momentum to carry you away. Another powerful approach is pattern interruption, which involves deliberately doing something unexpected the moment you notice automatic thinking gaining control. This might be shifting your physical posture, taking a series of deep, deliberate breaths, or directing yourself to a completely different question. The purpose is to break the automatic flow and create the conditions for conscious choice to emerge. The most seasoned practitioners of conscious thinking develop what might be described as thought awareness, the real-time capacity to observe thoughts as they arise and to determine whether to engage with them or allow them to pass. They develop a quality of internal witnessing that observes the thinking process from a slight distance without being absorbed by it. This level of awareness grants them significant freedom because they are no longer at the disposal of whatever thoughts happen to surface. Breaking the cycle of automatic thinking also requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to thoughts themselves. Thoughts are not facts. They are mental events that arise and dissolve in the same way that weather systems arise and dissolve. You are not obligated to believe every thought your mind produces. You are not compelled to act on every impulse that emerges. You can observe thoughts with objectivity, evaluate their usefulness, and direct your conscious attention only toward those that genuinely serve your growth and your goals. The ultimate aspiration is not to eliminate all automatic thinking. That would be neither achievable nor desirable. The genuine goal is to ensure that your automatic thoughts increasingly serve your highest potential rather than constraining it. When you commit consistently to the practice of conscious thinking, your mind begins generating more empowering, automatic thoughts. Your default mental patterns gradually shift from limitation toward possibility, from reactive fear toward settled confidence, from conditioned response toward conscious choice. Chapter 10: The Compound Effect of Conscious Thinking. Most people significantly underestimate the power residing in a single thought. They treat thoughts as transient mental events that surface and dissolve without leaving any meaningful trace. But the truth is that every thought you entertain carries a compound effect. It does not merely influence the present moment. It shapes your future by literally restructuring your brain and establishing momentum in a particular direction. Understanding the compound effect of conscious thinking is essential because it reveals precisely why small, consistent improvements in your mental patterns can generate extraordinary transformations across the span of time. The compound effect operates with thoughts in the same fundamental way that it operates with financial resources. When you invest capital and earn compound interest, the returns do not simply accumulate in a linear fashion. They multiply, generating exponential growth over extended time. A relatively modest investment made today can develop into something substantial decades later because each successive period's returns generate additional returns of their own. Your thoughts operate on precisely the same principle. Each thought reinforces neural pathways, influences your emotional life, shapes your decisions, and directs your actions. These effects accumulate and compound across time, producing substantial change from what appear to be modest beginnings. Here is the specific mechanics of how the compound effect of thinking unfolds. When you entertain a thought for the first time, it creates a fragile neural pathway in your brain. When you revisit that same thought, the pathway develops slightly more strength. Each repetition builds the pathway further until eventually the thought becomes automatic and arises without any conscious effort. But the effect does not terminate there. As the thought becomes more automatic, it influences your emotional life with greater regularity. As your emotional landscape shifts, your behavior shifts. As your behavior shifts, your outcomes shift. As your outcomes shift, your sense of identity shifts. A single thought, repeated with genuine consistency, possesses the capacity to fundamentally transform who you are. The identical process operates in the opposing direction with destructive thoughts. Each time you generate a limiting or self-defeating thought, you are reinforcing neural pathways that make that style of thinking more automatic. Over extended time, habitual negative thinking compounds into a pervasive emotional tone of pessimism, self-undermining behaviors, diminishing outcomes, and a contracted sense of personal worth and possibility. This is why people can find themselves in a downward spiral so quickly once they become caught in patterns of negative thinking. The compound effect accelerates the decline. The central insight is that the compound effect makes small, sustained improvements in the quality of your thinking extraordinarily powerful over time. You do not need to achieve a complete overhaul of your thinking patterns overnight. You simply need to make small, consistent improvements in the quality and direction of your thoughts, and the compound effect will carry the work from there. A single, slightly more empowering thought, practiced with daily consistency, holds the capacity to alter the entire trajectory of your life. This is precisely why awareness of your thinking patterns carries such weight. Every moment, you are either contributing to positive compound growth or to negative compound growth. There is no neutral territory. Your thoughts are perpetually moving you in one direction or the other. When you become genuinely conscious of this process, you acquire the capacity to deliberately navigate the compound effect in the direction that serves you. The most accomplished individuals across every field understand the compound effect of thinking, whether or not they use that specific language to describe it. They recognize that the thoughts they are entertaining today are actively creating their future reality, so they protect their mental space with genuine care. They consistently choose thoughts that compound into confidence, optimism, creative capacity, and the kind of character that attracts achievement. They understand that the quality of their thinking is not merely something that happens to them. It is the most significant and consequential investment they can make in their own future. To actively harness the compound effect of conscious thinking, you must first identify the specific domains where your thoughts carry the greatest influence on your life. These are typically the areas connected to your self-image, your convictions about what is possible, your interpretation of difficulties and setbacks, and the vision you hold of your own future. Small improvements in the quality of thinking in these particular domains compound into significant life-wide change. Consider a representative example. If you have been operating from the thought that you simply are not competent with financial matters, and you begin consciously entertaining the thought that you are developing excellence in how you manage your resources, this shift compounds progressively over time. First, the new thought makes you genuinely more receptive to financial education. This leads to improved financial decisions. Improved decisions generate improved outcomes. Improved outcomes reinforce your emerging identity as someone who is capable and skilled with their finances. Eventually, the compound effect transforms not only your material circumstances, but your entire relationship with the concept of abundance itself. The compound effect is further accelerated when you pair conscious thinking with genuine emotional intensity and vivid visualization. When you entertain empowering thoughts with real emotional engagement and detailed mental imagery, you produce considerably stronger neural pathways in considerably less time. This is precisely why the most significant internal shifts occur when people successfully combine clear, directed thinking with authentic emotional engagement and specific, sensory-rich visualization. Consistency is absolutely indispensable for the compound effect to operate in your favor. Occasionally, entertaining empowering thoughts is insufficient to produce lasting change because the compound effect demands repetition sustained across time. You must practice your chosen thoughts with consistency, even when you lack motivation for it, even when the established thoughts feel more natural and accessible. The compound effect privileges consistency far above intensity. This is also why patient engagement with the process is so important. Just as compound interest in a financial context may appear to work slowly in the early periods before accelerating dramatically, the compound effect of thinking often appears to move gradually at first. You may not observe dramatic external shifts in the first weeks or even the first months of consistent conscious thinking. But if you sustain the practice, a point will arrive when the changes accelerate sharply, and the transformation in your life will reflect back to you the full power of what you have been building internally. Chapter 11. The Reality Creation Protocol. There exists a systematic, repeatable process through which thoughts are translated into tangible reality. And once you genuinely understand this process, you gain the capacity to consciously design any life you can hold clearly in your imagination. This is not mystical speculation or the language of wishful hoping. This is a practical process grounded in how your brain processes information and transforms internal mental patterns into external actions and results. The Reality Creation Protocol is built on a foundational principle that is simple in its expression, but profound in its implications. Your external world will always reflect your internal world, given sufficient time and consistent application. Your thoughts produce your beliefs. Your beliefs shape your emotional life. Your emotions direct your actions, and your actions generate your results. Most people move through this process without conscious awareness of it, which is why their external reality so often feels arbitrary or beyond their control. But when you understand and apply this protocol with full consciousness, you become the deliberate architect of your own existence. The first phase is mental design. This is where you create a precise, richly detailed mental blueprint of the reality you intend to inhabit. Most people skip this foundational step, which is a primary reason why their efforts to change their lives so often fail to produce lasting results. You cannot build what you cannot clearly see. Your subconscious mind requires specific, vivid instructions about what to create, and those instructions are delivered through emotionally engaged, sensory-rich, mental imagery. Mental design involves considerably more than establishing goals or assembling a collection of inspiring images. It requires you to mentally inhabit your desired reality in complete, detailed dimension. Not simply what you will possess, but who you will be, how you will experience yourself, how you will move through your days, how the people in your life will relate to you, and what your internal experience will feel like from moment to moment. The more sensory and emotional detail you embed in your mental design, the more real and compelling it becomes to your subconscious mind. The second phase is neural installation. This is where you systematically program your brain to support your intended reality through repetition, emotional engagement, and focused attention. Your brain does not distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a lived one. So when you consistently visualize your desired reality with genuine emotion and concentrated attention, you are literally training your brain to experience that reality as natural and, in some sense, already present. Neural installation requires daily practice, ideally at moments when your brain is most receptive. The periods immediately upon waking and immediately before sleep are particularly powerful. During these sessions, you do not merely think about your desired reality as a future possibility. You experience it as a present one. You feel the emotions it would generate. You see through the eyes of the person who has already arrived there. You embody the identity of someone for whom that reality is simply their current life. The third phase is identity alignment. Your actions will always be consistent with your operating identity. So if you intend to create a genuinely new reality, you must first grow into the person who would naturally inhabit that reality. This means identifying the thoughts, the convictions, the values, and the daily practices of your desired identity, and beginning to embody them immediately, before any external evidence of change appears. Identity alignment is about operating from your chosen identity rather than striving toward it. Rather than thinking, when I finally succeed, I will allow myself to be confident, you begin thinking and conducting yourself with confidence now, because that is who you are within your desired reality. This shift produces significant changes in your behavior because you are no longer laboring to become someone different. You are simply being yourself, your evolved and expanded self. The fourth phase is reality bridging. This is where you begin taking deliberate physical actions that narrow the distance between your current circumstances and your intended reality. These actions are guided by your new identity and informed by the mental design you have created. You begin making decisions, cultivating relationships, and pursuing openings that are consistent with your envisioned future, rather than simply with your present circumstances. Reality bridging demands a quality of courage because it regularly means taking action before you feel fully prepared, committing resources before outcomes are guaranteed, and stepping into genuine uncertainty because your vision requires it. But when your identity is genuinely aligned with your intended reality, these actions feel natural rather than forced, because they are expressions of who you have already chosen to be. The fifth phase is momentum acceleration. As you consistently apply the preceding phases, you begin to observe evidence that your reality is genuinely shifting. These early indicators of progress create positive momentum that amplifies the entire process. Your growing confidence draws more opportunities toward you. Your improving results reinforce your new identity, and your expanding sense of what is possible makes your vision feel increasingly natural and inevitable. During the momentum acceleration phase, it is essential to keep your attention anchored to your intended reality rather than becoming preoccupied with your current circumstances. Your external reality will always trail behind your internal transformation. So, you must continue operating from your future identity even when your present results have not yet fully caught up to your vision. The final phase is reality stabilization. This is where your intended reality becomes your lived reality, and maintaining it requires no strain. Your new identity has become your automatic way of being. Your empowering thought patterns have become your default. Your external circumstances have aligned with your internal transformation. Reality stabilization does not signal the end of growth or evolution. It signals that you have successfully applied the protocol and are now positioned to use it to create even greater realities from this new foundation. Chapter 12. Mastering the Inner Game. Success across any domain of life is determined more by what unfolds inside your mind than by the external circumstances surrounding you. This is the understanding that defines every genuine champion across every demanding field. The real arena of competition, the real site of challenge, and the real location of every meaningful victory all exist within the mental realm. Mastering the inner game means developing complete and reliable command over your internal state, so that regardless of what is unfolding around you, you can consistently access the thoughts, the emotions, and the internal quality that produce excellence. The inner game operates on a foundational principle. Your external performance is always bounded by your internal capacity. You cannot consistently perform at a level that exceeds what your mental and emotional programming permits. This explains why certain people collapse under significant pressure, while others seem to find their best capabilities activated by it. Why some individuals abandon their pursuit at the first meaningful sign of difficulty, while others sustain themselves through challenges that appear genuinely insurmountable. Most people invest their energy almost exclusively in the outer game, acquiring skills, gathering knowledge, refining technique, and intensifying their effort. While these elements carry real importance, they represent a fraction of what determines whether you can successfully apply your capabilities when the circumstances truly demand them. The inner game is the development of unshakable confidence, emotional adaptability, sustained focus, and the capacity to access your best internal state regardless of external conditions. The foundation of inner game mastery is emotional regulation. The developed ability to consciously influence your emotional state rather than being directed by whatever emotions arise automatically. This does not mean suppressing emotions or projecting a feeling you do not genuinely experience. It means understanding that your emotions are substantially shaped by the thoughts you choose to entertain, and you can consciously influence your emotional state by deliberately directing your mental focus. Emotional regulation begins with a crucial reframe. Emotions are information, not directives. When fear surfaces, it is providing data about something perceived as a potential threat. It is not issuing a command to withdraw. When frustration emerges, it is highlighting something experienced as a barrier to an important goal. It is not commanding you to react impulsively. When you relate to emotions as information rather than as commands, you gain the capacity to feel the emotion, extract whatever useful signal it contains, and then respond with full conscious intention. The second foundational element of inner game mastery is what psychologists identify as mental toughness, the developed capacity to maintain effective internal functioning under conditions of pressure, uncertainty, and adversity. Mental toughness is not the absence of feeling or a performance of indifference to difficulty. It is the possession of such a firmly established internal foundation that external circumstances cannot destabilize your core competence and clarity. Mental toughness is built through progressive, deliberate exposure to conditions that challenge your emotional regulation. While you practice maintaining your optimal internal state in spite of those challenges, each time you navigate your inner state successfully under genuine pressure, you build evidence in your own mind and body that you are capable of handling whatever arises. That evidence accumulates and becomes its own form of confidence. Another central dimension of inner game mastery is the development of unwavering focus. the capacity to maintain concentrated attention on what serves your goals while filtering out the competing demands on your awareness. In an environment of near constant distraction, the ability to focus with genuine depth is becoming a decisive capability. Those who can sustain their attention on what genuinely matters while resisting the pull of what is merely immediate and stimulating carry an enormous advantage. Focus develops like a capacity that grows stronger with consistent exercise. Every time you choose to direct your attention toward something that matters rather than something merely stimulating, you are building your ability to focus. Every time you notice your attention has wandered and you consciously bring it back to your chosen target, you are practicing the discipline that makes focused attention increasingly natural. The inner game also requires mastery of your internal dialogue, the continuous stream of self-talk that either supports or systematically undermines your performance. Most people are entirely unaware of what their internal dialogue is actually saying, allowing it to run whatever commentary it generates, which often works actively against their best interests. Inner game mastery means taking conscious command of this internal voice and ensuring it consistently serves your highest level of performance. This involves cultivating what might be called an internal coach, a voice in your mind that encourages, guides, and supports you in the way an exceptional external coach would. Rather than internal criticism, you cultivate internal encouragement. Rather than running rehearsals of what might go wrong, your internal dialogue focuses on what specific actions will produce your desired outcome. Rather than mentally rehearsing limitation, you mentally rehearse excellence. The most sophisticated practitioners of inner game mastery eventually develop what could be called state independence, the capacity to sustain their optimal internal state regardless of external conditions. They do not require everything to be functioning smoothly in order to access their best capabilities. They do not need particular responses from others in order to maintain their confidence. They do not need ideal conditions to perform at their highest level. This state independence arises from the deep recognition that your internal state is your own responsibility and your own choice. You cannot determine what unfolds around you, but you can always determine what unfolds within you. Chapter 13. The Transformation Accelerator. There arrives a moment in every genuine transformation journey where the rate of change holds the capacity to accelerate dramatically. Most people never discover this inflection point because their attention is directed outward toward changing their external circumstances rather than inward toward upgrading the internal processing system that generates those circumstances. But when you understand how to optimize your mind for rapid and sustainable transformation, you can accomplish in several months what others require years to achieve. The Transformation Accelerator operates on the principle of leverage, identifying the specific internal points where small, precise changes create substantial, compounding changes in your external outcomes. Rather than laboring harder at changing surface behaviors, you work with greater intelligence at changing the thoughts and convictions that give rise to those behaviors. Rather than fighting against your existing patterns, you reprogram the patterns themselves at their source. The first component is what neuroscientists describe as state-dependent learning, the established reality that you learn and transform most rapidly when you are already in an optimal internal state, when you feel confident, energized, and mentally clear. Your brain is far more receptive to new information and new patterns than when you are experiencing anxiety, doubt, or distraction. This means the timing of your transformation work carries real and significant weight. Rather than attempting to reprogram your mind during periods of low energy or struggle, you strategically engage your transformation work when you are already accessing a positive internal state. You amplify those states and use them as launch platforms for even greater change. The second component is pattern stacking, the practice of installing multiple empowering patterns simultaneously, rather than attempting to address one element at a time. When you combine identity work, deliberate, visualization, affirmations, and behavioral shifts together, they reinforce each other and create synergistic effects that accelerate the entire process significantly. Rather than addressing confidence in isolation, you simultaneously inhabit the identity of a confident and focused individual. Visualize yourself operating from that state. Affirm your natural confidence and focus, and take actions that are authentic expressions of those qualities. This integrated approach creates multiple reinforcing neural pathways supporting the same transformation, making change both faster and more permanent. The third component is emotional amplification, the strategic use of peak emotional states to intensify the transformation process. Your brain assigns heightened attention and priority to emotionally charged experiences. So when you can genuinely access states of gratitude, excitement, love, or determined resolve while doing your transformation work, you create substantially stronger neural pathways in considerably less time. When you visualize your future self while feeling genuinely grateful for that reality, or when you practice new behaviors while feeling authentic excitement about the person you are becoming, you accelerate the rewiring process in ways that effort alone cannot replicate. The fourth component is future pulling, a practice in which you mentally inhabit your transformed reality so vividly and consistently that rather than pushing yourself toward change, you are naturally drawn forward into it. You create such a compelling and detailed internal experience of your future that you are magnetically oriented toward it. Future pulling involves spending dedicated time each day living mentally within your intended reality, not merely imagining it as a distant possibility, but experiencing it as your present. You think the thoughts your transformed self would naturally think, feel the emotions they would feel, and perceive the world through their eyes. This creates a forward momentum that makes transformation feel like a natural unfolding rather than a forced effort. The fifth component is evidence accumulation, the disciplined practice of noting proof that your transformation is genuinely progressing. Even in its earliest and smallest expressions, your brain is continuously scanning for evidence to support its existing beliefs. So, when you deliberately direct your attention toward signs of positive change, however modest, you train your mind to register more evidence of transformation, which in turn builds the conviction that change is real and accelerating. Keep a daily record of moments when you think a new thought, handle a situation differently than you would have before, or receive a new kind of response from others. Each entry is proof that your transformation is real. The sixth component is resistance dissolution, the proactive practice of working with the internal resistance that slows transformation rather than battling against it. Resistance rarely arises from obstinance. It typically emerges from parts of your psyche that are genuinely attempting to protect you from perceived risk or loss. By approaching your resistance with curiosity, understanding what it is trying to protect, and finding ways to honor those concerns while still moving forward, you can dissolve resistance rather than expending energy fighting it. The transformation accelerator also encompasses environmental optimization, consciously designing your physical spaces, your information environment, your relationships, and your daily activities to consistently reinforce your intended transformation rather than your old patterns. When your environment works with you rather than against you, change happens at a fundamentally different pace. You are not fighting friction at every turn. You are being supported and encouraged by everything around you. The most significant aspect of the transformation accelerator is identity momentum. The point at which your new identity becomes sufficiently established and clear that it begins naturally generating the thoughts, emotions, and actions that support your intended reality. You are no longer engaged in the work of transformation. You are simply being who you are, and who you are is naturally producing the life you envisioned. This momentum builds gradually and then reaches a threshold where transformation becomes self-sustaining and self-reinforcing. What seemed impossible begins to feel inevitable. What felt difficult begins to feel natural, and what you once only dreamed about begins to feel like the only reality you have ever truly known. Chapter 14. Living from your future self. The most powerful transformation practice you can cultivate is learning to operate from the perspective of your future self, the person you are in the process of becoming, rather than from the position of the person defined by your past. This is not a practice of pretense or performance. It is about accessing the awareness, the wisdom, and the natural patterns of your evolved self, and operating from that orientation right now before any external evidence of the change has appeared. Most people navigate their lives from the perspective of their past selves. They make today's decisions based on who they were yesterday. They interpret new situations through the lens of established experiences, and they project their future based on their historical patterns. This keeps them cycling through familiar loops because they are perpetually recreating what has already been, rather than opening into something genuinely new. Living from your future self means making today's decisions from the perspective of who you are becoming. It means pausing to ask, how would the person I am evolving into approach this situation? What would they think about this challenge? How would they feel in the face of this opportunity? What choice would they make? And then acting from that wisdom, even when it feels unfamiliar or requires genuine courage. Your future self is not an idealized fantasy with no connection to who you are now. Your future self is the natural evolution of your current potential. Who you become when the limitations, the fears, and the conditioned patterns that currently constrict you are progressively removed. It is you operating at your actual capacity with genuine confidence in your worth and your capabilities. The distance between who you are now and who your future self is may feel significant, but it is far shorter than it appears, and it shortens every time you make a choice from that expanded perspective. The first step in developing a living relationship with your future self is spending dedicated time in quiet reflection or visualization, connecting with the awareness of your evolved self and beginning to recognize how they perceive, what they value, how they make decisions, and how they naturally inhabit the world. This connection deepens when you approach your future self not as someone you are trying to urgently become, but as a trusted guide who has already navigated the path you are walking, and who can offer perspective from that vantage point. Living from your future self also requires what psychologists call temporal perspective shifting, the cultivated capacity to view your current situation from a future vantage point. When you are navigating a difficulty, you step into the awareness of your future self who has already moved through that difficulty and ask for their perspective on it. From that vantage point, problems that feel overwhelming in the present often appear more manageable, even genuinely useful, from the perspective of someone who knows what they ultimately led to. Your future self also relates differently to the challenges and uncertainties you are currently experiencing. They understand that the difficulty you are moving through right now is temporary and necessary for the growth that is underway. They feel genuine compassion for your current uncertainty or fear, but they also hold complete confidence in your capacity to navigate it. When you access that future perspective, you naturally develop more patience with the pace of your own transformation. You understand that your current discomfort is not evidence that something has gone wrong. It is evidence that genuine growth is underway. One of the most practical applications of living from your future self is using their orientation for decision making. When you are facing a choice, rather than asking, "What do I want in this moment?" you ask, "What would my future self choose?" This subtle shift consistently surfaces choices that serve your long-term growth and evolution, even when those choices require navigating some short-term discomfort. Your future self makes decisions from abundance rather than scarcity, from confidence rather than fear, from a long view rather than the pull of immediate relief. Living from your future self also transforms your relationship to setbacks and obstacles. Your future self knows that these apparent difficulties are actually necessary steps in your evolution. They do not interpret failure as evidence of inadequacy. They receive it as valuable feedback and as course correction. This perspective allows you to maintain forward momentum even when things do not unfold as you had planned. The most advanced form of this practice involves what might be called timeline integration, bringing the wisdom, energy, and awareness of your future self so fully into your present experience that the perceived gap between who you are now and who you are becoming begins to dissolve. When this integration reaches its most complete expression, you are no longer attempting to become your future self. You are your future self, operating in your current circumstances with expanded awareness. The transformation is not something waiting ahead of you. It has become who you already are. Remember, your future self is not waiting for you to earn the right to access their wisdom and perspective. They are available to you right now, in this moment, offering guidance and support for your journey. The question is not whether you can connect with your future self. The question is whether you will choose to live from that expanded perspective starting today. Chapter 15. The new you, starting now. This is the moment. Not a moment you will reach in the future when conditions align more favorably. Not a moment that requires additional preparation or external permission. This moment, right now, as these final words reach you, is the moment in which everything genuinely shifts. The version of you shaped by inherited programming, conditioned by automatic patterns, and constricted by beliefs you never consciously chose. That version can conclude its run in this precise instant. The new you begins right here. You have now absorbed the most consequential truth available to any human being. You become what you think, not because of mystical forces or vague inspirational sentiment, but because of the real, documented, scientifically established reality of how your brain constructs and continuously reconstructs your experience. Your thoughts are not passing noise. They are the architects of your reality, the programmers of your neural architecture, and the creators of every future moment you will inhabit. Every thought you choose from this point forward is a declaration about the person you are in the process of becoming. The new you recognizes that genuine transformation does not wait for readiness, for perfect circumstances, or for external validation. Transformation begins precisely when you decide to think differently, to consciously choose different thoughts, to step into a different identity, to operate from a different internal orientation. The new you understands that change is not something that happens to you from the outside. It is something you author through the consistent exercise of conscious choice. The new you no longer receives limiting thoughts as truth simply because they feel habitual and familiar. You now see inherited programming for what it actually is: outdated conditioning that can be upgraded at any moment you choose. You recognize that the vast majority of your fears, your self-imposed restrictions, and your sense of what is possible for you were never authentically yours to begin with. They were absorbed from your environment during a period when you lacked the awareness to evaluate them. And you now hold the capacity to replace them with thoughts that genuinely serve your potential. The new you operates from identity rather than working toward it. Rather than saying, "I am trying to become more confident," you simply are confident, because that is the identity you have consciously chosen to inhabit. Rather than striving toward achievement, you operate from achievement as your natural orientation. This fundamental movement from seeking to being is the shift that allows transformation to feel effortless rather than forced, natural rather than manufactured. The new you understands and deliberately applies the science of neuroplasticity. You know that every thought you choose, every visualization you engage in, every new behavior you practice with intention is literally reconfiguring your brain. You bring to mental transformation the same level of purposeful consistency that a serious athlete brings to physical training, with the understanding that repetition, patience, and genuine engagement will generate the shifts you are committed to creating. The new you has developed the capacity for conscious thought selection. You observe your thinking patterns with genuine objectivity and deliberately choose which thoughts receive your attention and energy. When limiting thoughts surface, you do not battle them. You simply elect something that serves you better. You have become the conscious curator of your own mental landscape, consistently directing your attention only toward thoughts aligned with your chosen reality. The new you operates from the perspective of your future self. You make today's decisions through the lens of the person you are becoming, rather than through the lens of the person defined by your past. You access the confidence, the clarity, and the expanded capability of your evolved self. Operating from that orientation, with the understanding that external reality reliably follows internal transformation, always, given time and consistency. The new you has activated the transformation accelerator. You integrate identity work, deliberate visualization, emotional engagement, and strategic action into a coherent and self-reinforcing system that produces real and sustainable change. You understand that transformation is not about exertion alone. It is about intelligent leverage, using the natural adaptability of your brain to create the shifts you are genuinely committed to. The new you approaches life with settled, earned confidence because you understand that you hold the capacity to consciously shape any reality you can clearly envision. You are no longer subject to the mercy of external events, other people's assessments, or the automatic momentum of your past conditioning. You know that regardless of what surrounds you, you can always choose your internal response. And your response, chosen consciously, practiced consistently, is what determines your reality. But most importantly, the new you understands that this transformation is not a destination you arrive at once and then consider complete. It is a way of living. You are always becoming, always evolving, always accessing new levels of your own potential. Each day brings new opportunities to choose more empowering thoughts, to embody a more expansive identity, to create a more extraordinary reality. The journey does not end, it deepens. The question before you now is a simple one. Will you be the new you, beginning in this moment? Will you step into your life as the deliberate, conscious creator of your experience, grounded in the understanding that you become what you think? Will you choose thoughts that transform? Will you inhabit an identity that expands you? Will you take the actions that demonstrate, day after day, who you have chosen to be? You have the understanding. You have the tools. You have the capacity. What remains is the decision, and that decision lives only in this moment, available only to the new you who recognizes beyond any shadow of doubt that your evolution is not merely possible. It is already in motion. Your thoughts constructed your past. Your thoughts are constructing your present. Your thoughts will construct your future. The only genuinely open question is which thoughts you will choose to practice consistently, because whatever you practice with consistency, you become completely. You become what you think, and the new you starts now. Thank you for listening to Elite Success Audiobooks. If this audiobook has shifted something real in the way you think about your mind, your identity, and your capacity for transformation, drop the number 888 in the comments below. And let this community witness the moment you chose conscious thinking over automatic reaction, chosen identity over inherited conditioning, and your deliberate future over everything that used to define your past.